My mom keeps asking about the thesis, so fine, if you want to hear about what I'm actually supposed to be doing, here we go. I'm Rebecca Farnum, this is Ramblings with Rebecca, and today, virtual water law. I can tell, you're excited already. You may remember from several episodes ago that we talked about virtual water, the water that's embedded in things, as they grow, if they're, made from food or organic materials, as they're synthesized and produced in factories, the water that goes into creating them, hydrating the workers, cleaning off the pipes, creating the electricity and energy needed to make that thing what it is, all of that stuff, right? So there's water embedded in everything, just as there are a lot of things embedded in everything, of course, but looking specifically at water for now. There's water embedded in everything, and it gets traded and flows all around the world in ways that we tend to not think of when we think of water movements, right? But given that water does fall unevenly and occurs unevenly around the world, but people are spread out much more. Some people have a lot more water close to where they happen to live, others have a lot less. And when we start shipping water all over the world in the form of grains and cereals and iPhones and clothes and glasses and blah-diddy, question arises of, whose water am I eating, drinking, sitting on, typing on, writing my homework down on, etc. So, for my thesis in water security and international development, I am starting to look at what international law has to say, or doesn't have to say, around those virtual water flows, right? So, say a Peruvian farmer in the Andes, where a lot of the asparagus that the UK consumes, particularly in the winter when we can't grow it ourselves here, comes from. Say that Peruvian asparagus is torqued because she realizes, or did I just say that Peruvian asparagus? The Peruvian farmer is torqued because she realizes that she has way less water this year than she did 10 years ago. And the biggest thing that's changed is suddenly in the middle of the desert regions of the mountains, there are these huge green fields that are growing asparagus, and she never eats that asparagus. I do. Okay? Can she sue me for eating her water? Should she be allowed to sue me for eating her water? Should I be allowed to eat her water? There are, of course, a lot of ways to respond to this. One, yes, of course, I paid for it. But did I actually pay for it, right? Because is the water that is embedded in that asparagus that is coming from someone, probably, is that accounted for in some ways or considered in the kinds of laws that regulate food and manufactured goods trades from place to place, and in the market systems and yada yada yada, right? So there are several different kinds of law that impact on this. The most obvious in some ways is trade law, right? There's a huge amount of stuff around food trade law. There's also stuff around trade in general, and I'll be looking a bit at manufactured goods and that kind of thing. There's then the international water law, which has grown in prominence, and probably I'll do a full section on international water law. However, international water law tends to focus on like rivers and lakes and groundwater aquifers that happen that occur between countries, so that cross a border, right? Transboundary water that we see as water bodies, right? It doesn't really say anything about virtual water, I don't think, at least not explicitly. And then of course there's also environmental law, some international agreements around climate change, things like that. Human rights law, if water is now a human right, does that mean anything, right? So I'm going to be looking at all of these bodies of law and seeing what they have to say about virtual water, which explicitly is basically nothing. Virtual water doesn't really exist in international law. But then what kind of ramifications might they have for virtual water trade? What ramifications should maybe the law have? And do we need to make these kind of issues more explicit in international law? So there you go. That's what I'm doing in my thesis. I hope I haven't just bored you to death. For me, it's actually really mostly a stepping stone into the law degree that I'm doing next year.